When Dr. Khan first sent a message out to the campus in response to George Floyd's murder, I was grateful. I was grateful to be part of a school and community that saw and spoke to the horror of Floyd's final moments and the casual cruelty of his murderer. I realized that George Floyd's death was not just one more at the hands of police, but a moment when the reality of racism became too obvious to ignore. And as actions and conversations started happening at Palomar, I looked for ways to join. I have been trying to understand racism for much of my life. A formative moment for me was living in Los Angeles at the time of the not guilty verdict in the Rodney King beating trial. The shock at the verdict, fear, anger, the city burning, ashes falling like snow, tanks and troops on downtown streets, my experience led to both wanting to understand and do more. Although I was clear about the unquestionable wrong of Rodney King's beating, I also wondered, why can't we all just get along? My understanding of racism as a system has helped me answer that question. I've come to recognize that racism is not just a set of ignorant beliefs. It is not just individual or consciously racist practices. It is embedded in our history, culture, language, policies, in a range of systems that shape our world, whether we are conscious of it or not. We can't all just get along when systems work in ways that perpetuate and are maintained by racism. As we marked 1 year since the murder of George Floyd, I thought about how much has happened, if not changed. The openness of the conversation around racism and police reform seemed like a moment of reckoning, though backlash was swift, including attacks on movements for justice and efforts to provide historical understanding of racism. I am again grateful for the commitment Palomar has demonstrated, from board policy to cultural work, healing circles, forums, affinity groups, action in HR and instruction, among other things. There have been webinars, reading lists, including reading and discussion of how to be an anti-racist. How to be an anti-racist emphasizes anti-racism as actively working to identify and change systems and policies that maintain racial inequity, injustice, and oppression. Anti-racism is about change rooted in analysis and understanding, but being anti-racist is about taking action, not just having knowledge. For me, action starts by pushing myself into places I'm not comfortable and to speak out. As a white person, I feel responsibility to step up. I have participated in the White Anti-Racist Ally Group and would like to be involved in creating opportunities for ongoing learning and discussion that helps build a culture of anti-racism at Palomar. The reading and discussions around how to be an anti-racist are one way to establish a shared language, common set of facts and framework from which to continue moving efforts at Palomar forward. But not everyone has read Kendi. People hear buzzwords, but may not understand the ideas behind the words or have discussions around what they mean. Ultimately, a long-term goal for me is to contribute to conversations at Palomar about the role of language and ideas in maintaining racism, about language dominance and racism, about biases in academic writing and assessment. My hope is that such conversations contribute to creating a campus community in which equity and anti-racist practices lead to greater success for all students.
Reading the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, helped me reflect on my upbringing in a colorblind society. From a young age, I was taught, and I'm confident that many people, but especially people who look like me, were taught the same thing. Don't see color, don't notice color. If you notice color, you're being racist. People are people, we're all humans, we're just one race. You can imagine the pop songs used to reinforce that point of view again and again. However, there's two problems with a colorblind ideology, aside from the fact that its existence is an invented fiction meant to address a problem by not talking about it, which is very bad advice in most contexts anyways. A, it's actually racist AF, and B, it's often used to perpetuate supremacist thinking. Some people listening surely shut off when I use the word supremacist, but if that's you, I really want you to listen to this because I want the me of 20 years ago to listen to me now because, man, I was like you. I'm not a supremacist. Everything would just be better if people did things my way. If everyone assimilated, we'd be better off. Like, tell me how you feel about this. I'm really glad you all chose Palomar College as your home. But well, I've seen you all teach. I've read your evaluations, seen the metrics. I've heard other people talk about your pedagogy. I've heard from your students. And seriously, what you're doing is not the Palomar way. That's not how we teach here, and that's not how we've been teaching here. That thing that you think is clever is really not. And that one joke you tell, it's not funny. Now listen, I've been here a really long time. I'm deeply trained in pedagogy. I've taught all over the world. I've taught teachers how to teach. I write textbooks. If you name an award, I have won it. My way is much, much better than your way. And if you do what I do, everyone is going to benefit. We would all be better off. So I'm going to need you to take some notes. Are you ready? Like, sit for a second and reflect on how you felt hearing that made-up garbage that I just said. I felt terrible saying it. This is a super simplified example, but what you're feeling is what people can feel in a supremacist system. A system where there's one highway and it's mine, my way only. You feel anger, belittlement, a sense of being misunderstood, discarded, othered, and unvalued. And folks, that's what a colorblind society does. If there's no color, there's one color. If there's no appreciation of diverse cultures, then there's one culture. If there's no alternate perspectives, then there's one perspective. Whose color, whose culture, whose perspective do you think that is? The one with the power, and the rest are expected to assimilate by expectation, coercion, or force. So what being an anti-racist means to me is seeing different colors and seeing cultures and perspectives steeped in those differences and seeing that embraced in my mind and in my actions and in our minds and in our actions and in our public spaces and in our classrooms and in our policies and in our policing and in our leaders and in how we speak to each other. And my action moving forward is bringing an equitable lens to policies I help write and bringing on board the people who, like the me of 20 years ago, are tuning these messages out.
In 2020, I read the book How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram Kendi. For me, it was thought-provoking to read Dr. Kendi's book and shocking to accept that I behaved in racist ways. Yet, I had a desire to see change within myself. After reading the book, I decided to embark on an anti-racism journey. And since then, I've committed to learn and apply an anti-racism lens in my practice. I've learned to no longer say, I am not racist, because according to Dr. Kendi, we are either being racist or anti-racist. Today, I understand what the term anti-racism means, and that it begins with me. To me, anti-racism is about actively identifying and opposing racism. I've learned that we can disrupt racialized hierarchies by examining our policies, procedures, behaviors, and our personal beliefs. While I recognize individual acts of racism exist, most racial damage is done through less visible actions, which may include policies, procedures, hiring practices, governance, curriculum, campus ethos, and much more. I recognize it may be uncomfortable to speak about race. And as challenging as it is, some of my colleagues and I have explicitly discussed race to determine how we can mitigate racial inequities at Palomar College. Since 1999, my commitment has been to promote higher education to marginalized and racially minoritized populations. Recently, I worked on various projects that include book clubs and examining our newly proposed governance restructuring with a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. I am committed to continue to advance the anti-racism efforts on campus. If you are a proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and you haven't read Dr. Kendi's book, I encourage you to read his message. I can tell you that once I read the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, it was extremely liberating for my spirit. The more we all continue to learn and understand anti-racism, the more we will heal within ourselves and eliminate racism at the individual, institutional, and structural level. Most importantly, the more we work together on anti-racism, the more we will promote social justice and respect for human dignity.